So I knew what I was going to preach about this morning. I was going to preach about rest. And then if you've listened to me preach for a while, you might know this is a theme that I come back to, that topic of rest and Sabbath and how important it is for us, for our bodies and spirits, and not just that, for others and for the earth. When we take rest and Sabbath in ways that are doing and consuming less, we're living more lightly on the earth and caring for it while we care for ourselves. So I thought, here we go, another beautiful passage all about rest. We picked our hymns. You'll notice the theme of rest and renewal appearing through it. And then I got back to the scripture passage this week, and I kept getting stuck about the fact that while Jesus said, let's go find a deserted place to rest, they didn't. They didn't. Because what happened? Shout it out. People came. Not just people came, but think about this. Like, they're sailing across a big lake, really big lake. The people see him. They run so fast around the lake that they get there before him. Right? Like, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, this literally cannot happen. Maybe if they're needing to tack against the wind the whole way, right? But the point is, like, the urgency of the crowds, the amount that they want to see him is faster than sailing across the lake. So we get stuck with this, but they don't rest. And I was thinking about it, and to just finish off our little theme of rest before we get to the end, maybe part of their rest was just sailing across the lake. Like, maybe that was the part where they rested. Maybe that's why it took so long that the crowds were able to run all the way around the lake to get there before they did, because they were really taking their time. It's not that rest doesn't happen at all, but rest really isn't the point of this story. We hear these stories again and again of Jesus' desire for rest being interrupted by the crowds and the need around him. So, while we say, yes, rest matters, and Jesus recognized this and named this, there's something else going on here in the story. The point is not, don't rest. Please, rest. But let's listen to what else is happening. So let's take a moment and think about what Jesus does when he gets to shore and the crowds are there already. In both stories, what does Jesus do when his desire for rest is interrupted? He looks after the sick. Yeah. Goes off by himself. In other places, yes. Not in today's story, though. In today's story, he stays right there with the crowds. Do you remember what he feels when he sees those crowds? Yeah, he feels like they're lost sheep. And there's this particular emotion that he feels, which is compassion. Compassion. So here we get to where I'm ended up with today's sermon, which isn't rest, but something else. That question of what do we do in that moment where our expectations, our wants or our needs, or our sense of being comfortable and having things the way we want it is interrupted by someone else. What do we do? Mark Brackett wrote a book that's called Permission to Feel, Unlocking the Power of Emotions to Help Our Kids, Ourselves, and Our Society Thrive. It was published in 2019, and I read this, I think, last year. And I came back across it this week because in my house we spent some time doing one of the exercises that he has in the book, which is called Creating a Mood Meter. And that's a chance for you to think about what's my mood in terms of my energy level and also pleasantness. So you could be high energy, high pleasantness, that's like happy, joyful. You could be low energy, but high pleasantness, that's like calm, content. Or high energy, low pleasantness, most often angry or anxious. Low energy, low pleasantness, sad, exhausted. And at a very basic level, we can think about which of these 4 squares, they each get their own color, represents where I am right now. And when we can name that, then we have the opportunity to think about where we want to be and how we can move ourselves there. So we were working on this exercise, so I was thinking about Mark Brackett and ended up back with his work a little bit. And he talks about a tool that he is one of the people that developed that's called a meta moment. A meta moment. So this is a tool that you use at the point at which your emotional state has been interrupted, has gone sideways from the way you wanted it to go, and you have a choice about how you respond. So he says, many of us were exposed to destructive responses early in our lives. Negative talk, screaming, blaming, and so on. They require little cognitive control, and they're often effective at getting rid of negative feelings and providing temporary gratification. But at the time, we fail to realize these strategies can also ruin our relationships and derail us from achieving our goals. So we developed a tool we call the meta moment, a hitting of the brakes and stepping out of time. We call it meta because it's a moment about a moment. Are you following me? So it's our chance to stop at the point where things could go sideways, and we could start expressing our emotions in ways that are harmful to us, our future prospects, our relationships, or others. Take a step back and then respond in a way that is more in line with what we want to have happen and who we want to be. So meta moments have 4 parts. The first part, and each of these starts with a word that starts with S, but if you're the kind of person that likes writing things down, you have permission right now. Get your pen out, get your phone out. If you'd like to write it down, you can. So the first part, sense the shift. The first step of this is recognizing when it's happening. What's going on in your emotions and in your physical body that's signaling a change, a shift from where you want to be? How do you feel when you're starting to get frustrated or when someone catches you from left field? Not just in your emotions and not just in your brain, but like, is it in your shoulders or your stomach? Is it somewhere else? Sense the shift. Pay attention to what's going on for your thoughts, your emotions, and your body. The second one, sorry, everyone online, you might not hear the beautiful music happening right now. The second one is stop or pause. So, they're illustrated beautifully. Stop or pause. There's your S. You could do this by taking deep, intentional breaths. If this is something that is a really strong shift, you could do this by counting in your head, out loud, something that's forcing you to take time so you're not immediately reacting, taking time. The third part, and this is where I think we start to move away from what we hear just sort of general advice, like take a few deep breaths and move on. The third part is see your best self. See your best self. So this might take a bit of reflection in advance about who you think your best self is. He suggests that you hold on to some adjectives or an image that for you represents who your best self is. one of the words that he suggests is compassionate. So we get back to Jesus here. He felt compassion. Well, we'll get back to the fourth step in a moment, but we'll just trace what Jesus did in this story. So we don't know exactly how Jesus sensed the shift for himself as he was going with his disciples ready for rest, and then suddenly there were crowds there and his plans went sideways. But we assume that he figured it out. Maybe it was his shoulders got tense or his stomach wasn't happy. Maybe he started feeling annoyed or upset. He sensed the shift and then stopped. He paused. He gave space to recognize that. Maybe it was just the space of like getting from the boat to the shore. He took that. Took that time, and even though his plans didn't go the way he wanted, he was able to do the next step of sensing his best self. And this is the part that we hear. He recognized that these people were like lost sheep. They hadn't come with the intention of ruining his plans, making life difficult for him. They came because of their need, their hurt, their longing. And he sensed his best self. He was filled with compassion. And then, step 4, strategize and act. Strategize and act. We have a few questions that can help you with this, both 3 and 4. How have I handled situations like this in the past? And what would my best self do right now? How have I handled things like this in the past? And what would my best self do right now? It's possible that after that first experience of Jesus going, finding the crowds, pausing, allowing himself to be filled with compassion, and starting the work of healing, he could draw on that experience for the next time he took the boat to shore, was surrounded by crowds, and his plans for a little bit of downtime were upset. It's not to say that he wasn't annoyed. Quite possibly he was. But he allowed himself to be his best self and to act in a way that was compassionate and caring towards others. So, sense the shift, stop and pause, see your best self, strategize and act. Those are the 4 parts of a meta moment. And this tool isn't one where you hear it once and suddenly you're the perfect best self at all times. But it's a way to break it down into something that we can practice again and again so that we become more and more what we see as our best selves. And this is the part where we now leave Mark Brackett and move back to the good news. Because sometimes it's hard for us to see our best selves. Sometimes all those emotions that we're experiencing, or the times when we think, how did I handle this last time? And we have a whole list of ways that we wish we hadn't handled it to fall back on. It's hard to catch hold of, but what am I capable of? What is my best self that I can be? But because we're people of faith, we don't have to rely only on us to see our best selves. We have someone else to see our best selves for us. And Jesus did that again and again in his ministry. He recognized the faith and the strength, the compassion and the generosity that the people around him had, even when they weren't aware of it. He allowed the people around him to be their best selves and named it. And kept on refocusing on what matters, what's important, How do we welcome and embrace others? So we know that this continues. We say that he does this for us still. We don't always have to see our best selves. We can trust that Jesus does. And then we can live towards that best self that he sees in us, that's more than we see in ourselves. Because he sees the love and the patience and the compassion and the generosity that you have, whether or not you notice it today. And he believes in our capacity to be our best selves. In the moments where things are going well, and even in the moments where things are going sideways and we don't get the rest we need. We don't just have to rely on ourselves in these moments. We can rely on him. And when we have that question about what does our best self look like, we can look to adjectives, words like compassion, but we can also look to images. And once again, we can turn to Jesus for those images that express what our best selves can be. Maybe it's this story where he moved into his work because the need was there. Maybe it's the story where he ensured that the people were fed. Maybe it's the story when he said, "Let the children come to me." Again and again, we can look to him as images of what our capacity is, what our best selves can be. This is part of what our faith is, living into being in the image of Christ. The Latin phrase is imago Christi, the image of Christ. This is part of our call of faith. That's our capacity. That's our potential. That's our gift, that we can be Christ-like in our day-to-day moments. It's a capacity that all of us have, and all of us do, and each of us can do more fully when we find the ways to step into those meta moments and give ourselves the time to recognize our capability, to know that we're loved for who we are, and then from that certainty, act with compassion. Thanks be to God. Amen.